welcome, glad you could come. For those who don't know me, I'm Martin Bates. I'm the superintendent of the Granite School District, and I'm glad don't try really hard to focus your eyes to that right now. We're going to improve that here in just a minute. But I'm grateful for the invitation to come speak with the Olympus Network community this evening to talk about in the formal informational kind of way to talk about the process and how the process moves forward. Quite frankly, the Olympus Network, more than any other network to this point, has done a fantastic job of informing itself. Let me say that differently. The schools and the people here in the schools have worked really hard to gather a lot of information. So I'm hopeful that this isn't too disappointing for people this evening, because what in the process that we have, what this evening is designed to do is provide information that in many of your schools you've already gathered yourselves. It's a much more procedural conversation tonight than a substantive conversation. I had opportunity to review with our Board of Education a couple of months ago. We had a study session, if you will, where we talked about the process, and in large part, due to a number of emails, not only from the Olympus network, but from other networks, as well as, I don't know how many of you are familiar with our district community council, but each network has 2 representatives on the district community council, and we had meetings about this reconfiguration process. And as we discussed this with our Board of Education, there were some real concerns about even the information gathering process being held up in some places by a handful of people or by a single school. And so in discussion with them, we've changed the process, and we've put notice of that out to you. I want to say, when I say out to you, to all of the schools in the district, several weeks ago, about some of the changes. And so this is actually a different presentation than you might have seen if you'd have been in any of the other 6 networks prior to this one having that conversation. And so, Ben, I'm going to invite you up. Where'd Ben go? There you are. To talk us through this new and improved flowchart.
Very good. Hi, everybody. I know most of you. We've been talking a long time, haven't we? So I've been up in this community to your school community councils just to answer informally a number of questions about the reconfiguration process. As the superintendent mentioned, that process changed recently, and I just want to walk you through some of the steps and highlights of those changes. Before I do that, when some of you walked in, I want to tell you the last few days of school are pretty much a hot mess at my office. And my guy, Stephen Powell, who does all of our video and infographic work, was printing off these informational vision statements from the schools, and he was still getting those as of late yesterday. Unfortunately, he printed off Skyline High's on Olympus High's letterhead. So the one you have in front of you is completely inaccurate. Feel free to make a paper airplane out of it. Your principal here... Correct. Preferably after the presentation. Your principal, Mr. Prashant, is going to print off his information again, and we'll have copies of that for you in a few minutes. So I apologize for that, and we'll definitely make sure we have that information correct for you. Those vision statements are written by the schools and the school community councils. The letter that is here is our content. So on the back of this letter, hopefully you saw this flow chart that I'm about to go through. When you blow up a PDF, sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't, but hopefully you can read this if you are unable to read that. So in the past, we had a process. We've been going through, we have 8 different high school networks since 2013, actually really 2012, when these discussions started happening in many of our communities. Granger High School and Cottonwood High School were the first to discuss the process of configuration, and the board adopted this process wherein all the networks, schools, through their school community councils, could request each of 3 steps. And if any of those school community councils dropped out of that process at any point in time, the process was that the whole process stopped. And so it really truly was a community-driven process before you could go to each consecutive step. So as we've kind of gone through this process, there's always going to be community interest and talk and conversation, and that manifests itself in many different ways. Sometimes it's me being invited to come speak to your school community councils. I know some of the schools have held informal meetings. I remember going to one at Driggs just several months ago and answering questions there, so on and so forth. Once we get to this next step, in the past, as the superintendent mentioned, it used to require all the schools in the network to request that informational meeting. Now, the informational meeting is what we're doing right now. Obviously, no decision has been made at this point in time. We have taken pains to highlight that on this form for you, just to make sure everybody knows exactly where we're at in this process. At this point in time, now that process has changed. The board did adopt a minor change to that to allow a simple majority to request the informational meeting, as well as take the next step, which is for the community survey. I want to spend a minute talking about the community survey because a lot of people have questions about that in the past, and I want to make sure it's clear how that's conducted. When we first started doing configuration surveys, we did those internally using some, can I explain this step real quick and come to your question? When we first started doing these surveys, we did those internally using SurveyMonkey and other tools like that. And what we found is on a self-selecting survey, it wasn't really giving us scientifically valid data. And so we now contract with a private third-party neutral organization that has no really care or say in the world about how the community feels on the topic, but has the scientific expertise to appropriately sample size the community and gauge its opinions on a variety of topics. And so we contract for that service. We put a bid out. We have a number of third-party vendors who come in and bid on that, and then we award a contract, and they come in and take several weeks for them to go through all the data and make sure they get an adequate sample size that's representative of the community. And then they take that data back to the school community council. You can see after that simple majority of community councils in a network gauge that support, it goes on to the next step to the left there, where there is now a community-led discussion on the survey results. A lot of people think that that survey information is for the Board of Education. No, it's for the school community councils who represent you to be able to make decisions and then be able to respond and represent you appropriately. So I'll pause there for a second because I did have a hand over here. Sure. Sue, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I want to clarify this, add a little bit something that Ben said just a second ago. This has been an administrative process. This isn't a board-adopted policy. This has been the process that we've used, clearly in consultation with the Board of Education. But Milton, just leave it right there. You're good. So the process changed. I alluded to this just a minute ago. Coming out of several networks in their reconfiguration process to include some conversations here in Olympus as well, there's been considerable frustration expressed at individuals, perhaps one or two in a community council, being able to hold up even the information gathering process, the formal information gathering process and conversation for the whole network. And so I discussed that with board members, they discussed that with me, and we decided that in those two places that we would change the process so that it would be a simple majority in those two, and I'm going to call them merit badges, okay, just for fun. So in that second merit badge and in that third merit badge, that rather than requiring a unanimous thumbs up from all of the school community councils, that for purposes of information gathering, it would just be a simple majority that could trigger those. Does that answer that question? And I'll come back to that again in just a minute as we get to another merit badge, but I'll give it back to Ben.
Yes. So if you look on this sheet, we have taken, again, great pains to point out exactly where your community is at in this particular process. We have not conducted We're up here in this, the little flow chart, little PowerPoint presentation in the upper right-hand corner of that document. So with respect to that, there's 2 more formal steps that need to take place before you can even make a recommendation to the Board of Education on any particular configuration change. Once that, I'll go back to where I was. After those survey results are then given to your community school community council to evaluate and assess, the vendor actually comes out, conducts a presentation, answers questions regarding the validity of the survey. Again, I'm not a statistician. I stunk at math, and that's why I'm a communications person. So I want somebody who actually has some expertise coming and explaining how they conduct their surveys and answering the community council's questions with respect to that. Sometimes those have been done together as a joint school community council, and sometimes we've had to have that vendor go out to each individual school community council. But either way, those are public meetings, and so they'll be posted appropriately, and I would hope that the principals would make sure the community was well aware of the opportunity to come and see the survey results. Once we get past that step, we are now to the final stage where you do see the unanimity required by all the school community councils, and the boss wants the microphone back.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to jump in again. Again, in response to the concerns that I was articulating a few minutes ago, members of the Board of Education have asked me to put on the board agenda for July a discussion on whether even that recommendation should say all, or if it should be a supermajority. And so that's a conversation. I can't answer that question tonight, other than that will be discussed in our public board meeting in July as to the advisability of having that be a supermajority rather than a unanimous group.
I do want to take a step back and just talk again really quick about the survey process, because I anticipate we might get a question or two about that. With respect to that, we hand over, they're a third-party vendor, so we hand over communication information, contact information for you or anybody else who currently enrolls within the Olympus network. That would include special permits individuals. Yes, we give them a say. Potentially in this process, they have the chance of being surveyed as part of that sample size. So the reality is we want any patron who's technically part of this network to be potentially surveyed as part of that process. So once we've gotten to that process, your school community councils come together as part of what the superintendent mentioned, requiring unanimity, meaning all the school community councils have to be on board at that point in time. So the process, I will point out that in a couple of other places, Cottonwood Network started this process. They had an informational meeting, and it stopped. And it didn't go anywhere for a really long time. And then at some point, the torch got picked up by some other school community councils. They went through that process and finished it. All told, it took about 2 to 3 years for that configuration change to happen, because it is a community-led decision. And we're not Canyon School District. They modified their configuration several years ago, and they kind of took a top-down approach on that. And so the school board has demonstrated a desire for the community to have say and influence on this particular process. You've seen those changes occur in other places throughout the district, but really it is incumbent upon your school community council at this point in time to decide what it wants to do. And so at that point in time, once all of those school community councils on board, they would then formalize a presentation, make a recommendation to the Board of Education in an open meeting. So there would be 2 steps to that process. They would come to one meeting as a first reading and make that request. And then the public is obviously invited to participate in that meeting. There are ways to comment as part of an agenda item and participate in that. And then a whole nother month occurs before the next meeting when a final decision would be made. I want to be clear that we try to get about a year's time, at least 9 months to a year, in between the time that this recommendation is made to the Board of Education and they either adopt it or reject it, between the time that gets accepted before it's implemented. And the reason that's important is we can't our Board of Education doesn't have the ability, well, they do have the ability. Our facilities people, our registration process, all these things that go into creating a master schedule, we can't magically shift 500-600 students in some instances over to a high school, for instance, in a matter of 2 months' time. And so we usually have about a 9-month to a year-long implementation process on the logistics. And so we have seen some of those requests come through as late as September and be approved, but that implementation doesn't occur until the next fall, if that makes sense. So with respect to that, I'm open to any quick questions with respect to the process itself. We want to make sure everybody's clear and understanding that. Otherwise, I'll turn the time back over to the superintendent. Go ahead. Oh, you're July 9th. That was impressive. So the July, yeah, those are usually the first Tuesday, but usually during the summer months it gets bumped to the second because there's a couple of holidays that kind of conflict with that happening. So you usually will see, if you're interested in the board's agendas or their schedule, it's simply graniteschools.org/board. And you can look up any of that information, how to contact your board member if you're interested in communicating with them. All that information is there, including the full schedule for 2019. Julie.
I just want to clarify, I think you just said that on July 9th, the board is going to be discussing whether this merit badge with the document.
Absolutely not. I did not say that. So let's be really clear.
Could you repeat the questions, or
Yes, I'll
at
say that
least
a little
let
bit
the
louder.
audience members speak
She
through the
just
mic?
indicated that on July 9th, our Board of Education is going to be discussing potentially an approval for reconfiguration. We're not there yet. Okay.
I was saying that on this process, they were going to consider changing all to supermajority.
That is correct. The superintendent did mention that. There is a potential discussion for that to occur. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so on that badge, she's simply indicating, or rephrasing what the superintendent was mentioning, that this process is up for discussion at the July board meeting. Does that make sense? So again, we are here in this community, right here in this corner. We are having an informational meeting. So there are 2 more formal steps at this point in time that need to take place before any sort of configuration change could happen. So will configuration happen this fall? Absolutely not. It's not feasible. Could it potentially happen the fall of 2020? That's up to your school community councils and you as a community what you decide. Any other questions or thoughts? That's the soonest it could be implemented. It could, as I demonstrated before, it could take several years, right? We've already, before we even got to this stage of the informational meeting, some of you I've been talking to about this for 2 to 3 years, I want to say. So it's really up to your community to decide how long they want to take with respect to making this decision or not.
So you said Cottonwood sat here for a while. What makes you move forward and what makes you sit?
So she asked the question, they had this informational meeting and they sat here for a few years. And what makes them move forward? You guys. You guys get to decide. The school community councils who represent you, they're the ones who formalize those decisions and make the request. That's on both. So to have this informational meeting, I think we have 9 schools in the network. 7 of them requested this meeting, which is obviously a majority. And then if we want to go to the next stage, which would be the community-wide survey, a simple majority would do. Very good. Did that make sense for everybody? Good. All right. Here you go, Super.
Okay. You guys all have dinner, or should we head home? Please.
Okay, so in order then to move forward with the survey, do we have to wait until the fall community council meet again to request that?
No. To move forward with the survey, okay, I think I hear the subtlety of what you're asking. So to move forward with a survey, a simple majority of the community councils in the network would need to request that that be done. So then the practical question is, well, when are the next school community council meetings? And that's what you're asking. And my sense is you can talk with your principal and say, hey, would you poll us? We'd like our community council to go on record right away that we want that survey to happen. And the principal says, ooh, school gets out tomorrow, I don't know that we can. He said, well, let's send out an email. We'll send an email around saying this is the issue, this is what the question is, would you let me know? And then they all send their emails back and say, that's something we want to do. And so then the principal sends a letter to me and says, hey, our community council voted, we'd like to request that community-wide survey to be done. And you know what, if I get a simple majority of those next week, then we'll get with the Y2 analytics and start putting that together. Are you emailing your principal right now? That would be a step in the process. Yes.
So
And
I've
I'll be-
had a lot of parents questioning concerns about who is going to be surveyed because they feel like the reconfiguration really doesn't affect high school students at this point, and they feel like elementary school and junior high kids, those parents should be the ones that would be
The question.
because it doesn't affect, high school.
Yeah, the question is who should be surveyed, and it ought not, as your suggestion, be the parents of a bunch of 12th graders who are never going to be affected by that. My recollection is that it's 9th grade on down, families that have 9th graders on down that receive the surveys for that very point.
Can I clarify on that? I want to be really clear that this is a sampling process, and so they do not survey everyone. There's 7,000, 8,000 families within your network, and so they will take an appropriate sample size from each school to make sure that that reflects, again, within a plus or minus based on their expertise as statisticians, to be able to assess appropriately whether what the community feels. So.
Demographic of like Middle Creek Elementary School, you have a lot of parents that, might look at that and just be like, that's just another email and toss it. So how are we making sure that we're getting?
Excellent question. I'm going to repeat it so everybody could hear. She mentioned that some of our more impoverished communities might not be paying as much attention. Is that fair to say? So
And they don't even have to be impoverished.
right.
Some of us just don't pay attention.
So with respect to that, they're traditional survey companies, so they do their surveys in a variety of ways. Phone calls, emails, they even push text to try and get a hold of people to make sure that they're getting an appropriate sample from each school within the community itself. And so the first question they ask, because you saw a big pile of papers out there, right? The district will organize a packet and mail it out to every household in the appropriate language to make sure everybody gets the information, right? And so the first question they'll ask is, did you get the packet? Well, a few people are going to say no, right? Because maybe Bobby didn't bring it home or it's still sitting in the backpack. That happens on occasion. And then the next question is, did you read it? And of course, 98% of everybody read the 16-page packet, right? And so it's kind of an interesting thing to see on the survey itself, but they do take pains to make sure, again, if it takes a little bit longer, it's because, again, it's speaking appropriate languages to get the appropriate sample from that particular community. So they work very studious to do that.
And they make sure that they have a statistically representative number from every school. Your question.
I just wanted to say that also on every school's website is listed the community council members, and usually there's an email attached to that. And so you could also, as parents, you can also email the community council members and let them know. Often, I sit on a community council, and we're often asking our parents to give feedback. It's a really important body, but it is not often participatory from parents. So this is
I should have just handed you the microphone. I'm sorry. No, every school's website has a listing of the school community council members, and likely they should have contact information for those members. So as a member of a school community council, you often find yourself in the position of, please give me information about how you feel, but you would be so welcome to send that information to your local school community council members so they have that, so that they really can know, have a representative sense, or be in a position to represent the neighborhood because they've actually heard from them. Thanks. Please.
Just a couple logistical questions. So if you did move forward, did they figure out their space in Olympus? Like, did they?
Yeah, this is the space in Olympus. The Olympus space question is what it is.
And in addition, the second language, like my son's in Berkeley and Spanish.
Yeah, and the dual immersion question. Great questions. The first one is easier to answer than the second one, and that is the space question. Olympus High School has somewhat more than 400,000 square feet of the school. Granger High School has 440,000 square feet, so it's maybe 10% larger, but it has 3,200 students there rather than 2,000 some odd. How many kids are here? No, there's 1,600. So if you added another grade to that, it could be to 2,100. So that's 50% more kids. Now I got to tell you, the classrooms at Granger High are about the same size as the classrooms here. So it's not. Those really are comparable numbers. It's a building that's 10% larger, but serves 50% more students. There's space here. There's room here for the kids. Now, to the dual language question, you see this community-led discussion on survey results and other pertinent information. That's more of a substantive question that you really need to talk through how you want to do that or not in your network and in your configuration. There is dual language, dual immersion started with a state recommended model. And William Penn, as you know, left that behind years ago. So there are different ways that looks like you don't know. Didn't know. William Penn left that. So that's a model. The dual immersion, dual language is a school-based program and can be modified as you want it to be. And so there are some community decisions that can be made there on how that would be implemented with the sixth graders. Quite frankly, there is an elementary model and there's a junior high model, and so just bottom line, if the sixth grade is in the junior high, then it would operate under the secondary model and not under the elementary model. It's my magnetic personality, I'm sure. Thanks for the courtesy laugh. Okay, other questions, please.
Like reconfiguration to move forward so that parents know what to do so that we can move.
If parents, and don't ever say I'm just a parent. If parents,
I do attend all the community council meetings, but I don't have a vote currently because I'm not elected. But what? And let me come back to what you said just a minute ago. I think you identify who all of your community council members are, parents and educators. And you communicate to them pretty strongly how it is that you feel. That's really the best thing you can do. And then, when these surveys are done, when those are done, they kind of come in two parts. It seems like there's the phone call or the person-to-person where there's a conversation, but there's also an email, not an email. There's a web-based survey where there's more communication. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, it depends on how quickly they're able to. They initially send out an email with a web-based survey, and if they can get to their sample size, and then they follow up with phone calls to make sure they're getting their sample size.
Very good. So when you see that web-based survey, answer it and respond strongly, and say this is okay. Thank you. Yes.
My situation is similar to hers. I've been serving on a community council for lots of years, and we've been talking about reconfiguration for all of that time, 6 years or so. And I'm from Evergreen. We're one of the schools that's kind of held up the process because repeatedly as a council we've determined that our students are better served at Evergreen than in reconfiguration for a variety of reasons. But I would say that if you are a proponent of reconfiguration, we try to be more collaborative instead of pushing agendas through that meet your needs and not necessarily other schools, and we all get on the same page and understand each other's needs. And that way, if that if we find ways to have needs met at our school and you have them at your school, then we can come together better on this. And to that extent, I would say, I would hope that the board and administrators at the district would help build confidence in the process. For those of us that don't support reconfiguration, it seems it's being, avenues are being made possible so that it can be put through very quickly, and that does not build my confidence in the process.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you. Did I see a hand over this way?
My question, I've heard twice now that there are not individuals with enough statistical analysis capability to do this in-house. So who do you have internally auditing the statistical analysis that's done by a third party? Because coming from Morningside and having to have my child now move schools 3 times, we looked at the data, and I do have expertise in statistical analysis, and there were error bars that were above 5% when looking at French immersion versus magnet program versus the regular students in the Skyline reconfiguration. So when we asked about who was actually checking the data, it was literally just tweets, crickets. So who's auditing that? Who's looking at those numbers?
That's a really fair question. We hire Y2 Analytics. They do all of they do not all, but much of the political polling in the state. Most of the candidates for political office use them for their polling, and so we have a good deal of confidence and an expectation in their product. We have not hired someone to be the watchdog of the surveyor. So you raise a fair question, and I would invite that when you are discussing the survey results and other pertinent information that you raise those questions.
Can I point out just simply when the Y2 or whoever the vendor will be at whatever time that survey takes place, please come to the meeting and make your questions or concerns. The information is relayed in advance. There's a little booklet that's provided. They provide a pretty in-depth report, and I'm not going to pretend I know or understand everything about statistical analysis, so your question would be fair to be directed right at them. We do have a question back here.
It is my understanding that the dual immersion program requires 6th graders to have at least 50% of their education in the target language. From your experience from other schools in the district, and that you have gained from these dual immersion schools that have already reconfigured, what do you know as far as the hiring of new teachers, the students' ability to choose elective classes, and any other little bits of information that could help us make a clear decision?
Thank you for that question. You used an interesting word when you said that the 6th grade requires. That is in the elementary model. The elementary model is a half-time model. And when 6th grades are in the junior high school, then it's no longer the elementary model. And I want to say at Churchill, they had a warm discussion about whether there would be 3 or 4 periods taught if there would be 2 or 3 periods taught in the target language. And that was really a decision that was made at the school, at the junior high, based on numbers and some other factors. So I actually don't know where that landed. Because is Josh here, Josh Leroy? Oh, it's his 20th anniversary. Okay, Josh will be the principal at Olympus Junior beginning next year, and Josh was the principal at Churchill when this transition occurred previously, and so he'll be a real resource to answer that very question. Please.
So there are endorsements required for 6th grade teachers to be teaching 6th grade to be teaching 7th and 8th. Are the teachers going to be expected to fund that all on their own?
Yeah, the endorsement question, that's a really interesting one. Elementary teachers have a K-8 license. And so depending on the endorsements that they have, what's happened in other networks, they've either chosen to do that, or some have said, you know what, I'd rather stay in the elementary school. We've got a host of teachers at Lincoln Elementary, where this is going on right now, who are already moving to become fifth grade teachers because that's what they want to do. So the district does quite a bit to help people be licensed in the area that they need to be licensed, but we're not going to send all of the sixth grade teachers to the university so they can get endorsements. Well, if they want to go to the university, they can, but we're not going to pay for all of those endorsements so that they continue to, so they could teach a specific subject in a secondary school. They can still teach the 6th and 7th and 8th grade students, but they would need the subject-specific endorsement to teach that in a secondary school. We work that through with the individual teachers, and we'll take care of that there.
Superintendent, might I add also that your community, your principals requested about, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago, that our HR department come and walk through our teachers who would potentially be impacted by this and help them understand how that process works. And we do really try to roll out the red carpet and make sure that we get teachers where they want to be and support them in getting there. So a lot of those questions have been answered directly to the teachers themselves.
In yellow, please.
Sorry, I was just saying that I'm not for it, which is why I'm here. I have kids who will be impacted. And I don't agree with it for a variety of reasons. But I'm just wondering, of the parents who are here, who is for it and who is against it? Could we take a little poll? I want to know what everyone is thinking. I don't know what people are thinking.
We did this at Cottonwood and it ended badly. Parents started yelling at each other.
Well, and the best part of Cottonwood was the Ivans family,
That's
where the
correct.
husband was on the one side of the room and the wife on the other, and they started yelling at each other, and somebody else needed it. So we're not going to go that way, but by all means, do that in your community council and have those conversations. Please. Yep. Wait. No, there may well be more cars, but most freshmen don't drive. Actually, many freshmen do drive, but they shouldn't be driving to school.
And I know in the last school year alone, of 3 or 4 kids who have been hit on the corner out here. And so that's a safety concern for me. That's my first question is, how is that going to be dealt with? And then I have a second question.
Okay, to the substantive question about what are we going to do with kids, and where are we going to park the new teachers, because there will be more teachers were that to occur. That's going to be a discussion that I really want you to have there in that community discussion. Raise that concern. What are those? I don't know, Steve, I don't know your parking lot as well as you do, and so I'm not going to try and answer that.
I'm waiting for somebody to build me a parking lot underneath the soccer field. I'll elevate the soccer field, so if any of you have any fun with that.
Okay, so but the question, the safety concern and the additional cars for teachers, you're absolutely right. Those are very legitimate.
Mark, let me add that real fast too. I know you're saying I'm just going to add another grade, but you also have to, if you're going to add another grade, I have to look at limiting some of the open enrollment permits. Like right now, Olympus High School, of the 1,600 kids, 300 kids come from out of the boundaries, out of Olympus boundaries.
About half of those are from out of district, by the way. But please, what was your second question?
Well, I want to go back to the first one real quick.
Okay.
There are kids that are getting hit on this corner. And I know that because I work in the emergency department and I came from there.
Okay.
So that's an issue that if you're having 500 more kids coming here, there are going to be more kids that are going to be hit unless something's done with the traffic.
Yep. And the something that needs to be done is a discussion on how you can alleviate that. You're right on. I'm not challenging that.
Okay. And then the other thing is that, I mean, I'm a parent, and so I'm not concerned about the logistics of having 4 grades in this class. I'm concerned about the fact that there's statistics
don't do as well in ninth grade in the high school as they did in junior high. And right now we have it where those ninth graders are doing well in junior high. So I'm really concerned about why would we want to move those kids who are really young in with the higher grades.
Yep, that's a great, the question is, if kids are doing well where they are, why would we, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's really what you're saying. And there the answer to that is going to need to be discussed in the community. I can tell you, and I'm not trying to talk you into it one way or the other. We've been having graduation reviews right now with in all of our high schools because graduation's on Thursday. And my understanding, there's a conversation with counselors today here in this school about that question. Would we be able to positively impact graduation at Olympus High School if the ninth graders had their career here? And my understanding is it was a pretty positive yes. I know that's the case at several other high schools here in the district, that absolutely 10th graders online for graduation, those rates are much higher in the 9 through 12 schools than they are in the 10 through 12 schools, because they get there as 10th graders and they're not online, where if they've been there. But that kind of information, those kinds of discussions, because you referred to statistics, and although I taught math, I didn't teach statistics. There are competing studies out there on this, and so those are going to be, again, that's going to be a substantive discussion that you need to have as a community as you're making this decision to move forward or to not move forward. Thanks.
Superintendent over here first, and then I'll bring you.
Please.
So I am just one that is in favor of reconfiguration, and for a few years I didn't care either way, but now I have a ninth grader starting ninth grade next year, and realizing the logistical nightmare of sports and athletics, my son will have to go back and forth between the junior high and the high school almost every day. And so now I am a huge proponent of moving it, because there's no way I can take him, and he likes his bike, and he'll be biking back and forth constantly between the schools. And that is a big issue that should be addressed, is just the safety of our kids, because I know there's a lot of parents who are doing that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and she had a
Sorry, I have one little thing. I think we can all agree that wherever we stand, it's because of our kids, right? My reasoning is 1% of the 1%, and it's silly to everyone else, but it's very important to me. So let's not get heated about it. We all care about our kids. The one thing I did want to ask, though, was we are the last schools on the east side to not go in this direction yet. Is there any information from either Skyline? And I know I have a kid at Woodstock, and I don't know how long. I think this is their first year that they've done the reconfiguration, or next year's their first year?
First or second.
Okay. So I have one kid at Woodstock, which is part of my reasoning. But anyway, is there information from those schools that we can hear the good of what they've experienced and hear the bad of what they've experienced?
Yes, and I would invite you to request that, by all means.
There's one over there, and then we can come over here.
Oh, you know what? The principals know each other. Have the principal call the principal. Call the elementary principal, call the elementary principal, or the whatever principals you want, and ask them.
So you get your community council member to talk, or you talk to your principal.
Yes.
And then the principal will call the schools and say, we need information, pros and cons.
Can we have some of your community council members come over? Can we have, right.
To that end, Superintendent, I would point out that other networks have done extensive homework. We had some taking bus tours over to Salt Lake and Canyon School District as council members to go and do some homework, and so we're happy to facilitate that to the highest extent possible. Yep. There was one over there, and then we can come back over here.
Ma'am? There are many reports, qualitative as well as quantitative as well as qualitative, that suggest. I mean, think about adolescence and how much environment impacts behavior. And so when they've been in the when they're in the same school, because ninth grade's high school. Ninth grade's high school all across the country, all across the state. The districts that experienced explosive growth, rather than build expensive high schools, pushed the ninth grade down to the junior highs. That's what Granite School District did. The fact that ninth grade is in the junior highs now, in a couple of school districts in Utah, is an anachronism. It's because of explosive growth years ago. So ninth grade is part of high school. And so what many have recognized is that adolescents, when the environment doesn't change, they want to keep acting the way they did before. And when the message to a ninth grader is, hey, you've got to take this year seriously, that's difficult because the environment doesn't change. But that message sends a message to the 7th and 8th graders that hear it too, meaning these years don't really count, not until ninth grade. So there are a number of reasons, again, quantitative and qualitative, that support what it is that you've just said. Please. Yeah, it can be split. It doesn't need to be the same thing. The Skyline network was the first and actually only network to do it all at once. And that was because their junior high schools really felt that student bodies of around 400 students or less would be too small to keep viable programs going. And so the 6th grade in that network was really important for numbers purposes. Since then, the Cottonwood network, they did it separately, and they have since that time, so Bonneville Junior got the 6th graders a year ago, and next year Granite Park Junior will get the 6th graders. So they did that. Those were disconnected, and they did them for different.
I would just point.
different
Sorry,
reasons.
don't mean to correct you there. Bonneville will go this fall. Granite Park will implement. Granite Park or Bonneville requested last year, but for
I'm
the
sorry.
very reason you
Yep,
indicated,
yep.
because they found that
That's
their
right.
numbers were insufficient and they were losing programs.
Yeah, they spend a year. They spend a year at the lower number, and now they're bringing them back. And that's
I have the correct Olympus High vision statements. I'm going to walk back and forth. Just give me a dirty look if you'd like one of these. We do have a question right here.
Please.
Yeah, so forgive me, I'm new to this discussion, recently moved here from Ohio. And I found it interesting as we were moving my 9th grader halfway through the year, and frustrated, to be honest with you, that no junior high could serve him. He was in high school level courses. And so to realize that the AB schedule of high school didn't accommodate for the 7-period schedule of Olympus Junior, we had no choice but to request by variance to move up to Skyline for him to be served. Being that this is a national trend more to have 9th graders as part of the high school, I just am an advocate for it. Now my son has moved twice because he's in 10th grade. He wanted to be in the boundary school. It was just an interesting thing as I talked to the counselors. They said this is often a big problem for anybody coming in from out of state. And maybe it's because he had come from a magnet type school that put him in some of those higher level courses. But to that end, I'm curious of an information packet, maybe he referred to, 16-page packet. What I'm curious is how accessible is information being disseminated? How can parents make an educated decision here? Because the parent back here talked about athletics, and it is hard to go back and forth, but I know that some students are being bused from Olympus Junior for academics as well, if they're in higher level math or anything else. And I imagine that's got to be pretty tricky for those students who are indeed accelerated.
Especially when you have different schedules that you're trying to navigate. So this is the wrong slide. Back to that flow chart. Packets are put together as in preparation for and as a result of the community-led discussion. And so each school puts, please. Yeah, good point. Yep. Yep. Of course there are cons. No, that's a great question, and I don't have an immediate answer for that. I think you talk with your school community council and with your principal, hey, let's put an information packet together here so we can have an informed conversation. No, this meeting, this meeting is in some ways also an anachronism. I said this a little bit earlier. The Olympus network is much more informed. You have informed yourselves much better than have other networks in the past. And so this meeting in other networks has just been to explain the procedure. And so you're asking lots of really good substantive questions. That's not what this meeting is actually designed for. And the numbers here, these are good representative people. All of you are good representative people, but the discussion needs to be much broader than the substantive questions need to be answered much more broadly than just the relatively few people who are here tonight.
Okay, so my couple questions are, is there ever going to be an option, or would there ever be an option to do 9th through 12th and then not do the 6th graders? And I know we had talked about how there's just not the numbers and things, but could they reduce, like I know I have family in Midway, and they have like a middle school, and then they have like where they go to 5 and 6 in one school, and they just have smaller staff. Is that ever an option to maybe?
Absolutely.
Because I think I see a lot of people that are more for the 9th grade, which I am, but not for the 6th grade. And I think the 6th grade, it's such a humongous jump from elementary school. It's baptism by fire, essentially. And then my other question, I forgot.
To the first question, 5 of the 6 networks did 9-12 and nothing with 6th grade. Skyline was the only network that did everything at the same time. Of those 5, the Cottonwood network has now, stepwise, is now moving their 6th graders up, but those don't need to be connected.
I'm also the PTA president for an elementary school, so at the beginning of the year, it was really frightening that both our 5th and 6th grade, both the teachers and the students were pretty nervous about it. But as the year has gone by, everybody's just kind of they've figured out that it's happening. And I know, it's like, because we didn't want our little 6th graders to go to the big, school. But Bonneville has just been a ghost town. I mean, it's very, very small in numbers, so it really needs those 6th graders. But our 5th grade, the counselors have come in and just made them feel really welcome, and they're really excited to go now. And all of the teachers are going on to junior high.
Thank you. You had your hand. Not anymore?
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th?
No, but 5th graders. So there are 5th graders today that next year will be 6th graders in a junior high, and that's a big jump. Yeah. No. Though that's another model that others experiment. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, last year I was on the community council in one of those schools that is now having their 5th and 6th grade both go to Bonneville next year, because my students were on permit at that school. But when we had this informational meeting, it came out that everyone wanted 9th grade to go to high school, and they wanted to leave 7th and 8th grade alone. Well, then Bonneville lost all their programs, which then affected Cottonwood, because then they didn't have anybody that was prepared to be in their orchestra. They lost their advanced orchestra. And so all these programs that are so important at the high school level didn't have the kids from middle school prepared to be part of them. And so really, yes, it's possible to have a 7th and 8th grade school, but it won't function. You won't have enough students. Then you'll have to close the school and bus your kids to a different junior high. And it's just a huge mess. So if you're going to do it...
Don't say close the schools.
No, sorry. I didn't say that at all.
Right.
No. We'll leave it open with 200 kids.
Don't use that as the lever.
I'm just saying that if you're going to do it, you really can't do just the one and then the other. It ruins programs from the high school level all the way down, the whole network gets impacted, and we saw that firsthand. And that's why they finally decided, okay, the sixth graders can go. And I mean, the community council really is where to get your information. Ask them. If they don't know, they can find out. They can do research. There's research that supports both sides. Whatever side you're on, you can find research to support you, but so can the other side. So just talk to your community council.
Superintendent, it might be appropriate to have school community council members stand up if they're willing to identify themselves.
Oh. Thank you for your service.
I know that at Evergreen, with the dual immersion program there, they would not be able to survive if we just had 7th and 8th grade. They wouldn't be able to have the extra programs. They wouldn't have it would just, all the extra things would go away. Moving 6th grade would help keep Evergreen well established, keep the great programs, keep doing the great things that they're doing there. And I know at William Penn, we are busting at the seams. 6th grade, if they moved up, we would not be using rooms that are not intended to be classrooms as classrooms. And that's been a real challenge for us for the last few years, is there's just not space.
There's no question that when the 6th graders move, you get more room in your building. And they're physically also larger than kids for a number of reasons, and it smells better. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But okay, lots of hands. And
how it is that these programs get lost, and how the number of students affects your schedule.
the concern about programs being lost, and this is, I'm going to give a superficial answer, I mean, with some substance to it, but this is one that's really important for you to discuss particularly if you're in a junior high school. Let's say you've got a seven period junior high school. So the teacher teaches 6 periods. The school is staffed at 27, for every 27.25 students, they get a teacher. So a teacher has to, let's see, what's that times? Teacher's got to have 180 some odd kids to be there full-time teaching one subject. So if the school population is so low that the interest in a particular subject is there, but it's only 90 kids, and you've only got enough kids to have that teacher half-time. And that makes it really difficult to maintain programs, because if they can go to another school and teach full-time, they'd prefer to do that. Or we call them singleton classes. And so if there are only 17 kids that are interested in a particular class, it's really hard to carry that class if your student body isn't large enough to subsidize that class size across the school as a whole. I'm seeing nods. Okay, so you're getting what I'm saying. So it's much easier to have, but see, this is actually one of the interests that a high school has. A high school with 2,100 students can offer considerably more programs than a high school that has 1,600 students. Is that fair, Steve? And so that's part of the interest in having more kids in the high school. There's similarly, and we've heard this alluded to a number of times, 6th graders in a 6, 7, 8 school have many more opportunities for advanced coursework than do 6th graders who are in a K-6 school. And so these are the kinds of things that you need to talk through, and the implications for schedules and for offerings and opportunities. Your hand was up quite a bit ago. Okay, maybe I didn't hear, I heard 2 questions, or 2 comments, and so let me address both of those. So when you say all or nothing, That takes me to this chart again. And our conversations, that's not what you want to talk about. Okay. So the reconfiguration, let me be crystal clear. Ninth grade moving to high school does not require the 6th grade moving to the junior high school. The vast 5 of 6 networks in the Granite School District did those separately. They just weren't connected. And in 4 of those 5, they're still not there. We've got K-6 elementaries, 7-8 junior highs, and 9-12 high schools, which is, by the way, what all of Salt Lake City School District is. But in the Skyline network, because of the concern about programs at the junior high schools, they did 2 things at the same time. They moved the 9th grade up and they moved the 6th grade up. And then in the Cottonwood network, they weren't holding archery practice in the hallways because there are so few kids, but they could have, and it would not have been dangerous. That's a joke. But but seeing how few kids there were, and thinking about programs that they could offer, that network, they've moved the kids to Bonneville, and then Granite Park is doing that a year behind. But those are two things that can either be done together or apart or not at all. Oh, yeah, my peripheral vision's bad on that side.
It's all good. So I've learned a lot tonight. I've really enjoyed actually hearing parents' comments that are from other schools than the schools my kids go to, because I hear a lot of different things, which it's nice to know what the needs are of different schools. I'm wondering if the district or someone would be willing to invite maybe Skyline and some of the schools under them, whether it's counselors or principal, for a meeting like this, where I think some of the really good questions that we're not able to answer, maybe we could throw out there and feel a little bit better about it. Like for me personally, I have a summer baby, so she would be like barely 14 going into high school, and I'm wondering kind of some of the social emotional changes having younger kids up in high school. But would that be a possibility instead of individual councils to have, like, because I kind of like hearing what the other schools and people's questions are, having like a Q&A with schools that just barely did this?
Absolutely. We're happy to support that. I don't know that you need us to do that for you, but if you feel that you do, we'd be happy to facilitate that.
Hi. So I have a process question. And it's my understanding that the board meeting in June, or is it July? Sorry. July is going to talk solely about the process, right? So is it too early to know on any of these steps, or are there any points of no return? In other words, if the survey comes back unfavorably, we kill it there and then it's expired for a certain amount of time, or if the board decisions to say no, can it be resurrected in a 2-year time? Are there any expirations or points of no return?
No. No, there aren't and let me the Cottonwood Network. The Cottonwood Network had this meeting, and then it was 3 years before they moved anywhere. And so, kind of my question to they even had a new principal at the time, and so I said to the principal, "You want me to come again?" He said, "No, we don't think we need you. It just took that long for us to have the conversation, and we'd like to start it up again, but you don't need to come have this meeting again." I said, "Okay." Now, if there's a survey and so let's say we have this meeting tonight, and then we don't hear about this for 2 or 3 or however many years again, and then the school community councils say, "Hey, you know what? We'd like to do a survey now." Then we'll do a survey. If we never hear a request for a survey, we won't ever do a survey. If we do a survey and we don't hear anything again for a long time, like 2 or 3 years, then we probably ought to do another survey because it's a different group of people that we're looking at. But that level of specificity has not been built into the process. I think we'll look to the community council. So a community council might say, the community councils might get together and say, you know what, we're ready to move again, but we think we need a new survey. And so we would look to them, look to the community councils for what makes sense is to move forward or to not move forward.
I have a couple questions here. I just wanted to highlight for your community's sake. I know that they didn't ask me to do this, I promise, but we have both of our mayors here from Holiday and Mill Creek. Would you guys just wave over there? Good supports of Granite School District. We would give them a round of applause.
Now, back to the question about the 7-8 only and not moving the 6th up. Excuse me. After doing the community council for the past 2 years and talking about this reconfiguration for our specific network, the understanding that we have had is because we have the dual immersion in the Evergreen, and because of numbers and seeing the other schools having a hard time keeping all their electives and keeping the programs going in their junior highs, that it wouldn't be smart to keep just a 7-8 model. And with the dual immersion in Evergreen, they wouldn't be able to have any electives if we only did a 7-8 model. So the question you're having is, if we want this to succeed for our junior highs and for the high school, the smartest decision is to move the 6th up to the middle school and along with the 9th grade to the high school. And so that was the research that we've been doing for the past 2 years while I've been on community councils, that if we're going to do this, it's better to move the 6th along with the 9th and not cut the programs from our junior highs. And
could one junior high reconfigure and the other not? Not that I options.
No. There's see
just to understand what's possible and what's not.
It's not possible for one junior high to send the 9th graders and the other junior high to not send the 9th graders, because you can't run half a 9th grade class and 3 full 10th, 11th, 12th grade classes. No, I'm talking 9th graders. Now, yeah, but I want to answer the 9th grade question first.
We have both ends that can be answered on that question.
Okay, so that's what you can't have one 9th grade you can't have one junior high send the 9th graders and the other one not. That doesn't work for the high school in running its program. But and this is what happened in the Cottonwood network. So the 9th graders, all of the 9th graders moved up. So then there were 2 7-8 junior highs. And one junior high, a little bit sooner than the other, Bonneville, said, you know what? We need the 6th grade to make the numbers work. And so all of those 6th graders moved up into, all of the feeder 6th graders to that junior high moved up to that junior high. The other junior high stayed 7-8, and the 6th graders didn't come for a year or so, and now they're coming as well. But the argument you're making that you should do everything at once is a very legitimate argument, and it's one for your community.
My question's related in some way to this. Has there been any discussion about unifying the models of the 2 junior highs that feed into the Olympus network? I read that as one of the major reasons for reconfiguration, that the 2 junior highs have 2 different models. I'm curious whether that's ever been discussed. If we have a unified junior high model, does that offer an alternative to reconfiguration at the high school level?
The choice between a 7-period day or a 4-period, an 8-period block is within the power of the schools to make today. What you just said is absolutely correct, it's not completely responsive to the question that she'd asked. Her question was, could we have basically her question was, hey, if Olympus Junior turns into an 8-period block, do all the problems go away? That was her question. And my answer to that was, that's kind of up to Olympus Junior. They could do that when they want to do that. You made a great point as well. Hey, if the 9th graders are gone, then you have whatever schedule you want in the junior high, and it doesn't matter. That's also a great point. Julie? Yeah, it's not that Olympus Junior's walking around going, oh, we could have done, no, that's not a new thought. So if anybody wants to know why Olympus Junior has stayed with the 7-period day or moved to then Julie has volumes of information she'd be happy to share. Please. Her, in a nutshell, let me paraphrase. 9th graders have many, many more academic opportunities and consequently advantages if they're served in a high school than if they're served in a junior high, and that has implications for college and beyond.
He's really being patient.
Oh, I'm sorry, go.
So I really do appreciate all the comments, but it is really about my kids. I don't really care how the Oklahoma system does things or somewhere else, because the reality is for me, no matter what system this works in, my daughter who's 13 will end up in high school if we reconfigure. So I'm actually very concerned about that, right? As a 13-year-old. So I'm going to drive her pretty much till she's a senior, right? So the thing is...
Thank you. Thank you. Don't just let her drive herself.
Right? So here, the thing is, I keep hearing about the goods of one thing versus the goods of another. There's numbers to support both sides.
You're right.
Right? And so I kind of hate the vagueness of how we talk about the goods of these things. Let's talk about what's really good for our communities, right?
Yep.
And there's different goods for the different people in our communities. Evergreen's working. Evergreen's working in an extremely great way for my family right now and for a lot of the families that are here, right? And so reconfiguration, I've heard multiple times tonight, what's good for Olympus High School. I'm not yet concerned as much about Olympus High School as I am about Evergreen Junior High, because that's what's working for my family.
Great.
Right? And so the last thing I kind of want to mention is, you know, there are consequences. We try not to focus on these. We try to put teachers, you know, where they go if they don't have the right endorsements and so forth. My brother's been surplus twice as a result of reconfiguration. That's a fact. And so he has had to re-endorse now multiple times just to get a job. And he's had off years every single time he's done that, right? And one of the last things, sorry, let me just say this last thing. In terms of the statistics and all of that I brought up earlier, I just want somebody ultimately to be accountable. Look, Y2 does a great job. They do a really great job. But if nobody is held accountable when or if they screw up, like in the case of Morningside, how do we hold them accountable if ultimately we're the ones who are supporting the survey process and we can't tell them you've screwed up? Where does that complaint go? I mean, what was told to me is go to the community. I did. I went to every single one of those meetings. I analyzed every one of the numbers. I talked to every one of the people involved. And I can tell you right now, when they got the hard questions, they were just like, yeah, we don't actually make those decisions. Right? And so that's a problem for me. Somebody has to be accountable for it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'd like to speak to diversity just a little bit, because I think the problems of Olympus Junior and students are very different from the students at Evergreen. And I would say the majority of us that are here, our kids are doing well. They're on track to graduate. We're not really terribly worried that they will get there. I have a daughter graduating this year, and I'm extremely grateful. Thank you to all who helped her get there. I think for me, when it has come down to reconfiguration, I would have no problem getting behind it if I felt like the needs of all students were considered. And for me, when I compare an accelerated student that has less opportunity but will ultimately probably graduate versus a student that we have worked really hard to accommodate at Evergreen. I mean, last year we had less than 10% of students offline to graduate, and that, considering our population, is like kicks some serious butt. And I just worry about, I mean, for me it's very clear that there are differences, and I really worry about those students coming to Olympus. I've seen many of the students that we've worked hard to keep on track. It's not that they don't get to have opportunities at Evergreen or at Olympus. It's that they're not held, they're not watched over and cared for in the same way. And as we talk about these things, there's a big difference between a student that will ultimately graduate. They may have to take some online classes because of the choices they've made for curriculum and the classes that they've chosen to participate in or the activities that they're involved in. For me, there's a very big difference between that student and a student that does not have support and that ultimately needs a lot of support to graduate. And those are the students that I feel like we have really nurtured and taken care of at Evergreen that kind of fall off the page at Olympus.
Over here. Okay, the year it's going to happen is there's nothing scheduled. Oh, okay. Let's say somebody, the gals left who were emailing their principal. So let's say more than half of the school community councils in the next week or so email us and say we'd like to do a survey. Then we'd put that together pretty quickly. It'd take a little bit of time. It'd take a couple of months to come back, and then let's say that it's end of May, June, July, August, September. Let's say it gets to the community councils again in September, and let's say that July 9th the Board of Education meets and they say, you know what, that formal recommendation from all, we want to change that to supermajority. And so then in September, there's a supermajority of school community councils that want to reconfigure. Then the soonest it could happen would be the August thereafter. Pardon? Simple is okay, how many? Simple is right over 50%. Supermajority typically 2/3, but they might say we want 75%. You know, 3/4 of the schools want to do it, we're going to do it. Or they might say 90%, or they might say we're going to stay with 100%. I don't know what they're going to say. They've just asked us to put it on the, but let's say they decided supermajority, and whatever that means, a supermajority did say that, and it was this next fall, so that's the fall of 19, then the soonest it could really be implemented would be the fall of 20. Okay, out of boundary students. Yeah, the building capacity of Olympus would need to be, Steve's talking, the building, you're good. The building capacity of Olympus is going to be, would need to be looked at very closely, and I'd encourage that to happen as part of these discussions right away. The permit piece, that just works the way the law dictates that works. Now, special programs like the dual language, under the law, they get a bump to the front of the line. But I don't know what I haven't computed the capacity and the building usage and traveling teachers and things like that. So that would need to. Compromise doesn't mean that 300 people get shown the door. So I don't know exactly. Affected, absolutely. When 600 new kids come, then we're going to need to look at what the capacity of the building really is, not just the capacity, but the utilization. Are there still, we've talked about this a number of times, I don't know the answer right now. Do you still have 7 computer labs in a building? Poof, they'd be gone. Right? So that's hundreds of kids that all of a sudden have seats because the computer labs are gone. And you are absolutely right. That's something to think about as you move that forward. Please. You know, sure you can. It puts principals in a bit of an awkward position, right? Because they're, and really our position has been, when I say our now, I'm talking about administration in the Granite School District, is we just want to do what the community wants to do. And so we've bent over backwards for several years to say, that's where all that unanimity stuff really came from. This is not a district agenda. Well, and the statements that are written there that are on the table are from the school community council, so from the principals, yes. And so I'd look at those, but I think it would, to hand them all the microphone and pass it down right now, might, not anticipating that question, you might not get the most complete answer. So ask that question, but probably not tonight. But be sure you do, because I think that's really important. Sure.
Because then you've got the numbers to support the 7, 8, and leave the 6th grade where they're at. I'm from Rosecrest, and I see
And you need to think that through very carefully. I heard the same from Bonneville about losing the 9th grade, and their 7th, 8th, what's that? And the Bonneville play was and the Wasatch play, really pretty good play. Up there, go ahead.
If the 9th grade moves up to Olympus High School, will Dr. Prashant be able to hire an additional 1 or 2 counselors to meet the needs of the new students?
Absolutely. The ratios stay in place in that, and so yeah, there'd be counselors. There might even be an additional assistant principal, but I'm not. I don't. Steve's going to want to start hiring. I've heard that before. Yes. Absolutely. Yep.
If you have concerns or questions, reach out to us. Like we've said, we've been very open, and I think I've been doing this well. I'm the council PTA president as well of our network, and I've been involved. I was involved over at Skyline and had friends, obviously, from there, and 6 years. We've been talking about this for 6 years, the same time that Skyline did.
Yep.
And we've really been trying to work out the bugs, and we've really been trying to do what's best for our areas. But again, you need, especially like with the Olympus Junior versus the Evergreen side, that is really where the bottom line of the changes are. So ask, get information, and get educated on how it's really going to affect both sides. Do the research.
You just gave my closing speech, and you know what? And people are doing their sneak out thing. So I'm going to end the meeting, but stick around. So if you still have things you want to ask, by all means, come talk to me. But folks, thank you for coming. And the point you made, I'll just make it again, is be involved. We put a lot of weight on school community councils and the recommendations that come from school community councils. So run or don't run, but in any event, be involved. Thanks, you guys, for coming.
Recognize the board members that are here.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have some board members here, too. Connie Anderson, and Todd Zenger, Terry Bodden. So 3 of our 4 board members, nope, that's not Terry anymore. Terry snuck out. So board members have been here listening to these conversations, and I'm confident we'll hear their thoughts. I'll hear their thoughts on July 9th when we have that meeting. Thanks, you guys, for coming.